Hello everyone, and welcome to part 2 of my landscaping school tutorial series. In the last episode, we cleared the terrain and used world edit brushes to reshape it. If you haven't checked that video out, be sure to watch it to see the conversion process. Our terrain is looking extremely basic right now, so it's time to begin painting the terrain and adding life to this desolate land. I will have a full list of all brushes and mods used in today's video down in the description. Let's start out by mapping out the path we laid out while forming the terrain. I used the brush shown and used the command mask coarse dirt to ensure I don't paint my path somewhere not desired. With the path in place, I can now move on to a new brush. I assigned a stone shovel with this command, then followed up with this one as to not add blocks, rather paint the ones existing. With the brush set, I begin to highlight my cliff faces and rocky sections. Since this is in creative, I decided to use a mixture of dead coral blocks since they offer a unique look for the perspective that I'm going for. In our survival world situation, a mixture of stone and andesite will substitute while looking just as nice. With the exposed cliff face finished, I move along to creating the snow-covered peaks by assigning a different brush with the shown command. I use the same mask coarse dirt command so that I can move directly over the rocky sections already painted without worry of converting them. Remember, if you accidentally cover an area that you didn't mean to, you can simply use the undo command I listed in the last video. Now we can finally get some green into this landscape. Once again, I assign a new brush with the shown command, followed by the same mask coarse dirt. I convert all areas that will become my forest. You can make this task easier by increasing the size of sphere by adding a 6 to the end of the initial brush command. A quick tip for running commands is that you can pull up your Minecraft chat by pressing T and use the up arrow to scroll through previously typed commands. So for instance, if you simply want to change the size of a brush, scroll to the line and then add or modify the size at the end of the text. It's time to give our lake some much needed attention. For this lake, I wanted to try something new. I used a deep slate variety and basalt combo to create a deeper look to the lake. Light wouldn't penetrate fully to the depths, so a shadow-like bottom effect is created. For the areas around the bank and creek, I used this combo for a muddy, silt-covered rock look. Don't forget to use a mask command as to not place large spheres of blocks. Let's add the blue stained glass marker that we covered in the last episode. This will make finishing the forest to shoreline transition easier with a visual reference for the finished water level. Moving back up to the mountains, I decided to add more snow, then create a transitional area where the summertime snowpack would recess, exposing rough rock without any vegetation. Here's the command I used to make that transition. With our canvas looking very lush and welcoming, let's work on the waterfalls that feed our lake. There wouldn't be much silt or sediment in this area due to the constant flow of glacier-fed water crashing down the terrain. I convert the bottom of the falls, then switch to this combo of blocks to create the sides of our carved out terrain. All the moisture would be a suitable place for moss growth, so the addition of mossy cobblestone helps create this effect. Now it's time to get wild with our design. I removed the blue stained glass layer that marked our water level and added layers of lime stained glass. I spaced them out, leaving a layer of air to create a fog effect at the bottom of the lake. This looks incredible if you have the Optifine mod installed so that the glass has a connected texture. With our murky bottom effect complete, it's time to add our water with a similar command as our blue stained glass one. From here, it's time to manually place water buckets to work the creek up the mountain. Minecraft water can be a nuisance to place, so take your time to get the flow that looks natural. With the roar of the waterfall around us, it's time to move along to detailing out our landscape. I begin by highlighting one of the trees that I built in the last episode. Use your World Edit axe and click on the glass blocks. You'll see the coordinates in your chat at each location. Once the corners are selected, I like to move to the base of the tree and then type this command to create a copy of that highlighted area. It copies everything in that box, including the air, so when placing trees around your landscape, be sure to use this command to prevent deleting chunks out of your custom terrain. I work my way around the canvas using trial and error to find the right locations and fit. If you find yourself trapped under branches of a tree, hold F3 and press F4 to cycle through different game modes until you get to spectator. This will allow you to simply fly out of that area. Use the same process to enter back into creative. Another tip I recommend while placing trees is to use this command to rotate the copied area. It works best in angles of 90 degrees. It rotates around the player's position with positive values going clockwise and counterclockwise for negative. You can only do one highlighted area at a time, so this step will be very tedious. Don't lose motivation. The end result will be worth it. With our forest now full of trees, it's time to move on to my favorite part of landscaping, the detailing. This is the part that brings your landscape to life, with undergrowth full of bushes, rocks, and all sorts of vegetation. Fill your inventory with azalea leaves, grass, ferns, mushrooms, mossy cobblestone stairs, slabs, and walls. Pick one section and start out by building your exposed rock faces. Since they are in the shadow of the trees, I always use mossy cobblestone to build them. Create unique shapes by placing the stairs in different directions and using slabs to create smoother rock faces. Once you have an area filled with boulders, I like to place my azalea leaves around them, breaking up the transition back into the forested area. Then spread those small azalea leaves around, filling voids between trees, mimicking new growth. Whenever I work on a section near or under a tree, I like to add in dead bushes to show previous growth to plants that were later choked out by the shadow created with their branches. Don't forget to add my favorite detail, the stone button. Little pebbles always add a fun little texture that creates another layer of depth in any landscape. Going back to my inspiration photos, you can see the entire area is green and packed full with plant life. Minecraft presents a unique challenge when creating dense forest because you are limited to block shapes, which is rarely seen naturally in the outdoors. You have to find a balance with your detail and in your landscape so you can still have an immersive experience without covering all your hard work in a blanket of leaves. Play around with sightlines by occasionally dropping down into your world and just walk around. Another challenge can arise while landscaping, which is proportion and scale. Since I wanted to include a large assortment of terrain into a small area, I had to compromise a lot with my details. Remember what I talked about when I brought up perspective? I had to find a way to make my trees look smaller as they got further up the mountain. But on the same note, you have to keep the trees in scale with the player as they ascend the terrain. One way that I have found to accomplish that is to switch the trees into short towers of leaves, creating a small looking tree shape above the large cliff face, while keeping my smaller trees along the path. Play around with the different types of leaves to add shadows and highlights with those smaller trees. I'm sure by this point you are exhausted from placing or moving blocks around to create your landscape. Large-scale projects are always intimidating to start. Don't force your detailing. If you find yourself pushing too hard and getting frustrated at the results, don't be afraid to take a break or two. Detailing out this area took me 3 whole days of work. I typically find myself flying or walking around my terrain when I have hit a creative wall. Mix up your projects as to not burn yourself out creatively. I always keep several different projects going on at once, so when I feel a burnout approaching, I simply jump over to a completely different project. On that subject, I got a look at my mountaintop and decided that the original idea for a spring wasn't going to work. The mountain peaks would look out of place with larger trees surrounding a pond or spring. So I used my sand sphere command and began reworking the area to create a glacier at the foot of the mountains. This will allow the melting runoff from the ice to supply our waterfall. I used the same snow texture mix in my glacier and added ice to simulate the melting portion. From here, it's all about the snow layers. I wanted to create a smooth look, so I manually worked the layers of snow into a gradual slope. Satisfied with the look, I used the tuff and gravel mix to transition the snow back into the forest area following the same principles used earlier. Don't forget to add in grass or ferns to show new sprouts of plant life once the snow and ice have melted. Turning my attention back to the lake, I think back of my time hiking up in the wilderness. While relaxing around a mountaintop lake, you'll typically see lots of algae and plant life submerged into the shallower borders of the lake. I didn't want to over detail the water, so I simply used seagrass for this effect. Another sight amongst mountaintop lakes is fallen trees into the icy water, so I used stripped spruce wood and fences to add a few trees that had fallen into the creek. Moving up the falls, I add more fallen trees, and I used dark oak wood to show wet areas of the tree that were submerged. I like the idea of a recently fallen tree above the falls, so I built a tree with leaves still intact, resting dangerously on the edge. All it would take is one small push to send that tree tumbling over the falls. Since I incorporated fallen trees around the waterfall, it's only right to add a few in the lake from where past winters have toppled them into the still waters. These trees have been preserved in the icy waters, rotting slowly due to the lack of wood-eating bacteria that were able to survive in such cold conditions. Happy with my submerged trees, I noticed a lack of fallen trees around my forest, so I quickly built a few randomly around my landscape, filling voids left from detailing earlier. The very last thing left in our landscape is a bridge to span the roaring waters. I decided to use a very simple, muted color palette for this bridge. I didn't want it to overpower the terrain, but simply be a roughly built bridge by the makers of the trail. This area is a direct recreation of one of my memories. I can still feel the cool mist of the water on my face while I marvel at the carved out falls, and maybe catch my breath from the hiking earlier. With the landscape complete, it's time to take in all of the beauty of the new terrain. I do hope that you found this video helpful in your own terraforming adventure. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you very much for watching this far, and be sure to drop a comment with something you learned or want to see featured in a future episode. This is Time Architect wishing you a fantastic day.